Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for inviting me to speak to your committee. The last time I had the honor to address the honorable parliamentarians of Canada was in relation to the Darfur genocide some 20 years ago. And here we are again, where never again is happening again, this time in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. I speak on this tragic matter from the perspective of experience with comparable situations. I was the first British government official to enter Rwanda in 1994 during the 100 days of killings to witness at first hand what a genocide looks like. I recall comparing notes subsequently with that great son of Canada, your former Senator, Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, who headed the United Nations forces in Rwanda. And not long afterwards, I had a ringside seat to the atrocities in Bosnia-Herzegovina, culminating in the Srebrenica genocide. Then, as Special Advisor to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, I was in Cambodia to examine the long and toxic aftermath to the 1975 genocide. Subsequently, in 2003-2004, I headed the United Nations in Sudan, trying to stop the Darfur genocide that unfolded on my watch. Sadly, we never prevented any of these genocides, although we had ample warning of them and could track their nasty progression in minute detail in real time. So we could not claim ignorance of these matters. The same is happening now in Tigray, where others will have testified before you on the depths of brutality and depravity being plumbed. My professional assessment is clear, based on my experience of nearly 30 years of international war and peace efforts. Progressive acts of genocide are being perpetrated by the governments and agents of the states of Eritrea and Ethiopia against Tigrayans. I assert this categorically for the following reasons. First is the orchestration of the violence on Tigrayans through the use of dehumanizing hate speech through Ethiopia's state communication channels, as well as state-encouraged social media. Second is a pattern of violence being experienced by Tigrayans. This includes direct attacks on civilians and mass rapes. It includes induced starvation, malnutrition, epidemic risk, and disease progression through deliberate Ethiopian blockade of humanitarian relief, food, and medicine. This is complemented by the systematic destruction of urban and rural livelihoods, including through cutting off electricity, internet, and banking. As these efforts are not targeted on combatants, but generally, consequently, they are violations of humanitarian law, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Third is the systematization of these crimes to the Ethiopian and Eritrean authorities' command and control structures and their official capacities. This imputes intent as well as proactive commission, not random acts of violence that can occur in the fog of war. Mr. Chairman, the Genocide Convention was defined in the aftermath of the Holocaust in the 1940s. Our world has changed immeasurably in the subsequent 70 plus years, and we must interpret the convention in today's context and realities. And so putting together the pattern of the multifaceted violence in Tigray in this, the second decade of the millennium, it is my conviction that the situation in Tigray is nothing less than a genocide. Of course, there are many deniers. Denial is a hallmark of genocide, as we know from their history. Also, there are apologists and distractors who argue that the conflict has complex causes and atrocities have been committed on both sides. That may be true, probably is true. But as we saw in Second World War Europe, soldiers on all sides did terrible things, but the genocide was committed only by the Nazis against Jews. Similarly, all groups suffered from violence in Rwanda, but the genocide was only against the Tutsi. And so too here. All of Ethiopia is suffering, including the Amhara and the Oromo, but the genocide is only against Tigrayans. Mr. Chairman, war is not illegal. Sometimes it is even necessary, civil war or across boundaries. But the acts of commissions of crimes against humanity is always illegal, and especially genocide. To test my assertion, we could ask the UN Security Council to rule or refer the matter to the International Criminal Court. But that's not going to happen anytime soon due to the paralyzing UN geopolitics and restricted referral rules to ICC. African regional mechanisms for accountability are similarly handicapped. But that should not paralyze the planet. Genocide is a crime of universal jurisdiction, and all states have a duty to use their domestic legal systems to investigate it. Canada's courts could also do that. It would be good to get such legal determination that parliamentarians are the supreme lawmakers in democratic states like Canada, where you've already declared the repression of the Uyghurs in China as a genocide. And I would urge parliamentarians in Canada to consider such an inquiry and for you to make your own determination. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, the explicit recognition of a genocide is important, not because we can prevent it, but to mitigate its worst effects so that humanity can rise again. And that's why it's important that we don't keep on talking about the causes of the conflict and who attacked who first and so on. That may or may not be relevant. But a genocide, the commissioning of acts against humanity and crimes against humanity, is something that every country in the world and all legislatures in the world have a duty to do something about. And I believe that you, Mr. Chairman, and your colleagues have a prime duty in the democracy that you are supreme lawmakers of, to act through the mechanism that you have so that we can put an end to the inhumanities that we're seeing in and around Tigray. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.